Have you heard of transgender rights being called a far left issue? Have you heard people say that? If you have, what do you imagine? Like when you hear that, what comes to mind? Because what comes to mind to me when I hear people refer to transgender rights as a far left issue is I imagine somebody yelling at somebody else. I imagine finger wagging. I imagine a lot of anger. I imagine the threat of cancellation. I imagine intolerance. I imagine people being in fear of making a mistake. And that fear leading to not even trying because that feeling that it doesn't even matter if you try. You feel like you're going to be villainized regardless. I'm wondering if that's what you imagine when you hear that. And that it creates a lot of anger and animosity when you hear that transgender rights are a far left issue. Because I want to tell you that transgender rights are not a far left issue. Transgender rights are human rights. All those things that I just mentioned are a strategy that some people use to fight for transgender rights. But those are not transgender rights. Those are a strategy to fight for transgender rights. Maybe that strategy is a far left strategy, but transgender rights is not a far left issue. Transgender rights is a human rights issue. But if you think of transgender rights in that way that I just mentioned, if you call it a far left issue, if you think about it in that way, then it makes sense to me that you might feel some animosity. You might feel some rejection of it. But it also makes sense that you would forget that you're talking about human beings, that you're talking about people. So I want to point out that when you're feeling that way, you're not feeling that way about the issues. You're not feeling that way about transgender rights and transgender issues and transgender people. That feeling is about the strategy that you're imagining that some people use in fighting for transgender rights. But you're not feeling that way about transgender issues. People talk and discuss and try to educate on transgender issues in lots of different ways. Employers and others put in standards supporting transgender rights in a variety of ways. That is one way, but there are other ways. There are those that set the expectation, may offer gentle corrections, but don't offer any discussion. There are those that set the expectation, this is the way we expect you to be. We expect you to honor people's pronouns and will welcome discussion and have understanding for how someone may feel, but will not accept anything outside of their expectations, that you will honor someone's pronouns and the standards for which are set, but they will honor a discussion. And then there are other people that educate and discuss, but will not set an expectation on your behavior. Just hope with continued conversation that maybe your behavior will change. There are all these different strategies in which people educate or create expectations for your behaviors based on where you are, based on whether your employment situation, based on whether your school, based on whatever governing body you are under. There's all different strategies. But the thing that they all have in common is talking about the human and civil rights of a group of people who are transgender. And so I bring this up because I hear over and over again people talk about transgender rights as a far left issue. I hear it brought up over and over again because I also hear language like gender ideology. And I think the concern I have when I hear that language is a couple of things. It takes away the humanness of what we're discussing. It takes away that we are talking about people and their right to exist within our society, their right to have access to live their lives, their right to have access to medical care, to the standard of care. As physicians, we swear to uphold the standard of care to the best of our abilities. There is a reason that a multitude of medical professional associations support gender affirming care because of the evidence that is remarkably out there. And so, yes, transgender rights are human rights with access to standard of medical care. We are talking about the civil rights of human beings to be able to get a job, the standard rights of human beings to be able to be in society, to go out into society and have access to public facilities, to be able to use public facilities safely, to not have to worry about how long am I going to be out in public? Will I be back in time to be able to use the bathroom when I get home? No, they should be able to go out in public and have access to all facilities and not have to worry about that. Just like everybody. When we talk about transgender rights, we're talking about human beings. And I think when we start focusing on the strategies that some people use, we lose sight that we're talking about human rights and human beings, and we undermine that. So next time you hear or you find yourself talking about transgender rights as a gender ideology, or you find yourself talking about transgender rights as a far left issue, stop yourself or stop what you're hearing and think about what are they actually talking about. Remind yourself that we're talking about human beings. And human beings are not an ideology. Human beings are not a far left. What are they actually talking about? Typically, they're talking about a strategy. Typically, they are forgetting the human beings. Typically, they're getting lost from the facts. Remind yourself that these are human beings. I encourage you to learn and connect with the stories of human beings. It is harder now than ever because it is not safe for transgender and non-binary people to share their stories. I see it more and more often on social media that those that have willingly shared their stories to bring a human face to people, to get to know transgender and non-binary people, are starting to back away because of the amount of threats to their lives and their families that they are facing. They are shutting down their accounts. But there are books, there are stories you can read. Books like Sissy by Jacob Tobia. Books like Pageboy by Elliot Page or Redefining Realness by Janet Mock. Tomorrow Will Be Different by Sarah McBride. All Boys Aren't Blue by George M. Johnson. Becoming Nicole by Amy Ellis Nutt. Love Wins Out by Dr. Rizi N.B. Nutt. Letters from My Brothers, collection of essays by Megan M. Rohrer. So many books, so many options. Get to know and recognize that these are human rights. These are human beings, not to be confused with the strategies that some people use to fight for them. It is hurtful, to be quite honest, when people stop seeing the humans that we're discussing, the humans that are losing their access to healthcare, the standard of care needed, their ability to access public spaces, especially by those that once supported them, because all of a sudden it is seen, their human rights are seen as an ideology, that they're no longer seen as a person, but seen as a far left political view. Don't get lost between some people's strategy and human beings. Understand and recognize the difference. Transgender rights are human rights. They are not a far left perspective. They are a human perspective that some people may take a far left strategy to speak and fight for. That happens not to be my strategy. One's not right, one's not wrong. We all have our own ways of educating and talking and fighting and discussing and communicating. But at the end of the day, it doesn't change the fact that transgender people are human beings and human rights matter.